The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as President Xi Jinping stepped out of his armored limousine. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant sound of horses from the royal stables. This was his third day of the state visit to the United Kingdom, and already the meetings had been more productive than anyone had expected. Prince William stood at the castle's entrance, his navy suit perfectly pressed, a warm smile spreading across his face as he watched the Chinese delegation approach. The prince had always been known for his diplomatic charm, but today there was something different in his demeanor, a hint of mischief that his close friends would recognize immediately. "Mr. President," Prince William extended his hand warmly. "I trust you slept well?" The Queen's quarters can be quite overwhelming for first-time guests. Xi Jinping chuckled, his translator quickly relaying the conversation. "Your Highness, the accommodations were extraordinary. Though I must admit, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed every hour through the night. Very traditional." The two men walked side by side through the castle's ornate corridors, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stone walls. Portraits of long-dead monarchs gazed down at them, silent witnesses to centuries of diplomatic encounters. But none of those previous meetings had quite the same energy as this morning's conversation. "You know, Mr. President," Prince William said as they paused before a massive window overlooking the castle gardens, "I've been thinking about our discussion yesterday regarding innovation and tradition. You mentioned how China balances its ancient heritage with modern progress." She nodded thoughtfully. "It's a constant challenge, Your Highness. We must honor our ancestors while embracing the future. Sometimes the old ways and new technologies can work together in surprising ways." Prince William's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you today. But perhaps we could have this conversation somewhere a bit more unconventional than a conference room." The Chinese president raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the prince's tone. His security detail, consisting of 6 stern-faced men in dark suits, shifted slightly, their eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. They had been briefed on every aspect of this visit, but something in the prince's manner suggested the schedule might be about to change. "I'm listening, Your Highness," she replied, his curiosity clearly piqued. Prince William gestured toward the window. "Well, you see that courtyard down there, just beyond the rose garden?" He pointed to an area where several vehicles were parked. Among the standard diplomatic cars and security vehicles, one particular automobile stood out like a jewel among pebbles. She followed his gaze and saw it immediately, a sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin DB12, its polished surface reflecting the morning sunlight like liquid metal. The car seemed to shimmer with an almost otherworldly beauty, every curve and line speaking of British engineering excellence and luxury. "That," Prince William said with evident pride, "is the latest addition to the royal garage, fresh from the Aston Martin factory in Gaydon. It arrived just 2 days before your visit, and I haven't even had the chance to take it for a proper drive myself." The Chinese president stared at the magnificent machine, his diplomatic composure momentarily forgotten. Despite his position as leader of the world's most populous nation, despite commanding respect from global leaders and controlling policies that affected billions of lives, Xi Jinping was still, at heart, a man who appreciated fine machinery. "It's beautiful," he admitted, his voice carrying a note of genuine admiration. "The British have always excelled at creating things of both beauty and function." Prince William smiled, recognizing the perfect opening. "You know, Mr. President, I was thinking we have about 2 hours before your next official engagement. The roads around Windsor are quite spectacular this time of year, with all the autumn colors. And that car down there is just sitting idle, practically begging to be driven." Xi's translator worked quickly, but the president had already grasped the implication. His security chief, a man named Chun Wei who had protected Chinese leaders for over 2 decades, stepped forward with obvious concern. "Mr. President," Chun said in Mandarin, "the schedule is very tight today, and the security implications." But she held up a hand, his eyes still fixed on the Aston Martin. Something about the car called to him, awakening memories of his younger days when he had dreamed of driving fast cars along winding roads. Before the weight of leadership had settled on his shoulders, before every moment of his day was planned and protected. "Your Highness," she said slowly, "are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Prince William's grin widened. "I'm suggesting that sometimes the best diplomatic conversations happen away from conference tables and formal settings. I'm suggesting that you and I take that beautiful machine for a drive through the English countryside. Just two men talking about the future of our nations while enjoying one of Britain's finest automotive achievements." The Chinese delegation exchanged worried glances. This was not in any protocol manual. State visits followed strict schedules, with every minute accounted for and every security detail planned months in advance. The idea of the President of China taking an impromptu joyride with the Prince of Wales was unprecedented. But as she looked at the car again, then at Prince William's eager face, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a spark of spontaneous adventure. The responsibilities of leadership had made him cautious, calculated, always thinking 3 moves ahead. But here was an opportunity to simply be human for a moment. The security concerns alone. Chen began again, but she cut him off with a decisive gesture. "Chen, how long have you been protecting me?" she asked his security chief. 12 years, Mr. President. And in all that time, have I ever done anything truly unpredictable? Anything that wasn't carefully planned and analyzed from every angle? Chen considered this. "No, sir. You have always been very methodical." She turned back to Prince William. "Your Highness, if I were to accept this invitation, and I'm not saying I am, what would the arrangement be exactly?" Prince William had clearly thought this through. "My own security team would coordinate with yours. We'd have escort vehicles at a discreet distance. The route will be pre-approved and swept for any concerns. But the drive itself would just be us in that car, having a conversation about whatever comes to mind." The Chinese president looked around at his entourage, diplomats, translators, security personnel, all watching him with varying degrees of anxiety and anticipation. Then he looked back at the Aston Martin, gleaming in the sunlight like a promise of freedom. "You know, Your Highness," he said finally, "throughout this visit, we've talked about building bridges between our cultures. Perhaps it's time we experienced a piece of British culture firsthand." Prince William's face lit up with genuine delight. "Is that a yes, Mr. President?" Xi Jinping smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a world leader and more like an excited schoolboy. "Your Highness, show me this famous British engineering. But I have one condition." "Anything, Mr. President. You let me drive." The next 30 minutes at Windsor Castle resembled a carefully choreographed dance of organized chaos. Chun Wei stood in the castle's communication center, his phone pressed to his ear while simultaneously coordinating with 3 other security agencies through his earpiece. Maps of the surrounding countryside spread across every available surface, marked with red lines, blue circles, and yellow triangles indicating safe routes, potential hazards, and emergency rendezvous points. "I cannot believe we are actually doing this," Chen muttered in Mandarin to his deputy, Lu Ming, who was frantically updating contingency plans on his laptop. 12 years of protecting the president, and now he wants to drive a sports car through the English countryside with royalty. Lu looked up from his screen, his fingers still typing. "Sir, the British security team is actually very professional. Their advanced planning is excellent, and Prince William's protection detail has experience with unconventional situations. Indeed, the British side of the operation was proceeding with remarkable efficiency." Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison, Prince William's lead protection officer, moved through her checklist with military precision. She had coordinated security for royal visits to war zones, natural disaster areas, and highly volatile political situations. An impromptu drive through Windsor's countryside was unusual, but far from the most challenging assignment she had handled. "Route Alpha is cleared and confirmed," Morrison announced to the joint security team assembled in the castle's briefing room. We'll have unmarked vehicles positioned at quarter-mile intervals along the entire 12-mile circuit. The local police have been informed and will maintain normal patrol patterns to avoid drawing attention. Meanwhile, down in the castle courtyard, a small crowd had gathered around the Aston Martin. The car's midnight blue paint seemed to absorb and reflect the sunlight in equal measure, creating an almost hypnotic shimmer across its perfectly sculpted surface. Prince William ran his hand along the hood, his excitement barely contained. "She's a beauty, isn't she?" he said to David Mitchell, the royal household's head of transportation. "I still can't believe they delivered her just in time for this visit." David nodded appreciatively. "The timing was perfect, Your Highness. Though I must admit, when you first suggested this idea yesterday evening, I thought you were joking. Sometimes the best diplomatic breakthroughs happen when we step outside the expected protocols," Prince William replied. "My grandfather always said that you learn more about a person in 5 minutes of shared adventure than in 5 hours of formal conversation." Inside the castle, President Xi was experiencing his own moment of preparation. His personal aide, Wang Lei, helped him change from his formal diplomatic attire into more casual clothing. Dark blue jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a leather jacket that made him look more like a successful businessman than a world leader. "Mr. President," Wang said as he adjusted the jacket, "are you certain about this? The media implications alone could be significant." She examined himself in the mirror, noting how different he looked without his usual formal suits. "Wang, do you remember when I was party secretary in Fujian province? Before all this?" He gestured vaguely at the opulent room around them. "Of course, sir. That was many years ago. I used to drive myself to work every day. A simple sedan, nothing fancy, but I loved those morning drives through the mountains. I could think clearly, plan my day. Sometimes I would even stop for breakfast at a roadside restaurant and talk with ordinary people." She's eyes grew distant with the memory. "When did I stop doing things that brought me joy?" Wang considered this carefully. "Perhaps, sir, when the responsibilities became too great to risk such simple pleasures." "But what if we're wrong, Wang? What if taking calculated risks, experiencing genuine human moments, actually makes us better leaders? What if hiding behind protocols and security barriers prevents us from truly understanding the people and cultures we're trying to connect with?" Before Wang could respond, a gentle knock came at the door. Prince William entered, now dressed in his own casual attire, dark green chinos, a navy sweater, and brown leather boots that looked well-worn and comfortable. "Mr. President, I hope you don't mind the casual dress code," the prince said with a smile. "I thought it might be more appropriate for our adventure." She laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "Your Highness, I was just telling Wang how long it's been since I dressed like a normal person. This feels liberating." The two men walked together through the castle corridors, their conversation flowing more naturally than it had during any of the formal meetings. Without the weight of ceremonial clothing and the pressure of official protocols, they seemed to shed years of diplomatic formality. "I must ask," she said as they approached the courtyard, "how did you convince your security team to approve this plan so quickly?" Prince William chuckled. "Well, it helps that Sarah Morrison, my protection officer, is quite brilliant at logistics. And honestly, I think she was relieved to plan something more interesting than another ribbon-cutting ceremony or hospital visit." They emerged into the courtyard to find both security teams assembled around the Aston Martin, their preparations nearly complete. Chenwei approached the president with a final briefing folder. "Mr. President, all arrangements are confirmed," Chen reported. "We will have 6 escort vehicles maintaining visual contact at all times, emergency medical support positioned along the route, and direct communication with both Chinese and British authorities. The route has been swept twice for security concerns." She accepted the folder, but didn't open it. "Chen, I appreciate your diligence. But for the next 2 hours, I want to forget that I'm the president of China. I want to be just a man enjoying a drive with a new friend." Chen's expression remained professional, but those who knew him well could see the concern in his eyes. "Of course, sir. But please remember that we cannot forget who you are, even if you choose to." Detective Inspector Morrison approached Prince William with her own final checklist. "Your Highness, all systems are ready. I'll be in the lead vehicle, maintaining a discreet distance. Radio check every 15 minutes. And we have 3 alternate routes prepared in case any issues arise. Prince William nodded. Perfect, Sarah. And remember, this is meant to be a relaxed drive between friends. Let's try to keep the security presence as invisible as possible. The moment had arrived. The Aston Martin sat gleaming in the afternoon sun, its engine purring softly as the royal mechanic completed final checks. The car's interior, visible through the open driver's door, revealed sumptuous leather seats in deep burgundy, a dashboard that resembled a high-tech cockpit, and a steering wheel that seemed to promise adventures on winding roads. President Xi approached the car slowly, running his fingers along its sleek lines with obvious appreciation. Your Highness, I must confess something to you. Of course, Mr. President. It has been over 15 years since I last drove a car myself. Everything is always driven for me now. I hope I remember how. Prince William grinned and tossed him the keys. Mr. President, I have a feeling that driving is like riding a bicycle. Some things you never truly forget. She caught the keys, their weight solid and reassuring in his palm. He looked at the car, then at Prince William, then at the assembled security teams who were trying very hard to appear calm about watching the president of China prepare to drive an extremely expensive sports car through the English countryside. Your Highness, she said, his voice carrying a note of boyish excitement that his diplomatic training couldn't entirely suppress. Shall we make some diplomatic history? The Aston Martin's engine responded to Xi Jinping's tentative touch on the accelerator with a deep, throaty purr that seemed to vibrate through the very stones of Windsor Castle. He gripped the leather steering wheel, feeling its perfect weight and texture, and slowly guided the car through the castle gates. Behind the wheel of the magnificent machine, the president of China transformed from a carefully guarded world leader into something more fundamental, a man rediscovering the simple pleasure of driving. This is extraordinary, she murmured, his eyes bright with concentration as he navigated the car through Windsor's quiet streets. The responsiveness is incredible. I can feel every nuance of the road through the steering wheel. Prince William, settled comfortably in the passenger seat, watched his guest with obvious satisfaction. That's the beauty of British engineering, Mr. President. Aston Martin has been perfecting this balance between power and precision for over a century. Each car is essentially a work of art that happens to have an engine. They turned onto the A332, leaving Windsor behind as the road began to wind through the Thames Valley countryside. Autumn had painted the landscape in brilliant shades of gold, amber, and deep red. Ancient oak trees lined the roadway, their branches forming a natural cathedral overhead. In the distance, the gentle hills of Berkshire rolled away like a green and gold carpet. Your Highness, she said, allowing himself to press the accelerator slightly more firmly. I must tell you that this was not what I expected when I accepted your invitation for a state visit. Prince William laughed. The best experiences rarely are what we expect, Mr. President. Some of my most meaningful conversations with world leaders have happened in the most unlikely places. My father once had a breakthrough discussion with a South American president while they were both stuck in an elevator for 40 minutes. Really? Xi's eyebrows rose with interest as he smoothly navigated a gentle curve. The car responded like an extension of his will, leaning slightly into the turn with perfect balance. Absolutely true. They emerged from that elevator having resolved a trade dispute that had been deadlocked for months. Sometimes formal settings create formal barriers that prevent real communication. The road ahead opened into a longer straight stretch, bordered by rolling fields where sheep grazed peacefully. She glanced at the speedometer, noting they were traveling at exactly the posted limit. His security training died hard, even during moments of freedom. You can go faster, you know, Prince William said with a mischievous smile. This particular stretch of road is quite safe, and I happen to know that the local constabulary has been encouraged to be understanding about diplomatic vehicles today. She hesitated for just a moment, then pressed more firmly on the accelerator. The Aston Martin responded eagerly, its powerful engine singing as they surged forward. The sensation was exhilarating. The countryside blurred past the windows in a kaleidoscope of autumn colors, and for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. "This is incredible," he exclaimed, his diplomatic composure completely forgotten. "I had forgotten what it feels like to have this kind of control, this direct connection between intention and action." Behind them, at a discreet distance, the security convoy maintained perfect formation. Chen Wei, riding in the lead escort vehicle, spoke quietly into his radio. "Package is secure and enjoying himself. Route remains clear. All stations maintain current distance." In the Aston Martin, the conversation had moved from cars to more substantial topics. Prince William, emboldened by Xi's relaxed demeanor, decided to venture into more serious territory. "Mr. President, may I ask you something that I've always wondered about? What is it actually like to lead such an enormous nation? How do you make decisions that affect over 1 billion people?" She slowed slightly as they approached a charming village, its stone cottages looking like something from a fairy tale. Children playing in a schoolyard waved at the sleek car, and she found himself waving back with genuine warmth. "Your Highness, that is perhaps the question that keeps me awake at night more than any other," she replied thoughtfully. "Every decision has consequences that ripple outward like stones thrown into a pond. Sometimes I think the hardest part is not making the decision itself, but living with the weight of knowing that your choice will affect millions of lives." They drove in comfortable silence for a moment, passing through the village and emerging again into open countryside. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, and the air coming through the slightly open windows carried the scent of wood smoke and autumn leaves. "But you know what I've learned?" she continued, his voice taking on a more philosophical tone. "The most important decisions cannot be made from behind a desk in an office. They require understanding the real world, experiencing how people actually live. Like this drive we're taking right now. I'm seeing your country in a way that no diplomatic briefing could ever convey." Prince William nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly why I thought this might be valuable for both of us. Sometimes the most important diplomatic work happens when we stop being diplomats and start being human beings." They crested a small hill, and before them stretched a magnificent view of the Thames Valley. The river wound through the landscape like a silver ribbon, reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Rolling hills extended to the horizon, dotted with ancient woodlands and picturesque villages. "Pull over here," Prince William suggested, pointing to a scenic overlook. "There's something I want to show you." She guided the Aston Martin into the small parking area, the car coming to rest with barely a whisper from its perfectly tuned engine. They stepped out, stretching their legs and breathing in the crisp autumn air. The view was breathtaking, a panorama of English countryside that looked unchanged from centuries past. "This," Prince William said, gesturing broadly at the landscape, "is what we're really talking about when we discuss preserving heritage while embracing progress. These hills have been farmed for over 1,000 years, but the farmers today use GPS guidance systems and sustainable agriculture techniques our ancestors could never have imagined." She stood quietly for a moment, absorbing the scene. In the distance, a church bell chimed the hour, its sound carrying across the peaceful valley. "It's beautiful," he said simply, "and you're right about the balance. In China, we face the same challenge on an enormous scale. How do we honor our 5,000-year history while building the infrastructure for our future?" A comfortable silence settled between them as they leaned against the Aston Martin, two of the world's most powerful men simply enjoying a moment of peace. The security teams, positioned at discreet distances, maintained their vigilance while allowing their principals this rare moment of normalcy. "Your Highness," she said eventually, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you hadn't been born into your position? If you could have chosen any path at all?" Prince William considered this carefully. "I think about it sometimes. I probably would have been a helicopter pilot, or maybe worked in conservation. Something active, something that made a direct difference. What about you, Mr. President?" She smiled, his eyes still fixed on the distant horizon. I think I would have been an engineer. Building things, solving practical problems, creating solutions that improve people's daily lives. Sometimes I wonder if we've both become too removed from the hands-on work of actually building the world we want to see. The conversation was interrupted by the gentle buzz of Prince William's radio. "Your Highness," came Sarah Morrison's voice. "Just a reminder that you have approximately 45 minutes before the return journey should begin." Prince William acknowledged the message, then turned to Xi with a regretful expression. "Mr. President, I'm afraid our adventure has a time limit. But there's one more stretch of road I'd love to show you before we head back. Are you ready to see what this car can really do?" The road ahead curved through dense woodland like something from a dream. Ancient beech and oak trees formed a living tunnel overhead, their branches intertwining to create a cathedral of golden leaves. Shafts of late afternoon sunlight broke through the canopy, casting dancing patterns of light and shadow across the asphalt. This was the famous Bishopsgate Road, a stretch of countryside that automotive journalists often described as one of England's most beautiful driving routes. She settled back into the driver's seat with renewed confidence, his hands finding their natural position on the steering wheel. The previous hour of driving had awakened muscle memory he thought he'd lost forever. The Aston Martin hummed beneath them, its engine eager for the winding road ahead. "This section is quite special," Prince William explained as they entered the wooded area. "It's been a favorite route for testing British sports cars for decades. The curves are challenging but safe, and the scenery is absolutely magical this time of year." She nodded, feeling the car's suspension adjust smoothly as they encountered the first gentle curve. The Aston Martin seemed to dance through the turn, its engineering allowing driver and machine to work in perfect harmony. I could see why this would be popular with car enthusiasts. The road seems designed for exactly this kind of driving. As they progressed deeper into the woodland, the conversation turned to more personal territories. The informal setting and the shared adventure had broken down barriers that formal diplomatic protocols never could. "Mr. President," Prince William said, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you seem different today than during our formal meetings. More relaxed, I suppose." She laughed, navigating a particularly elegant S-curve with growing confidence. "Your Highness, I could say exactly the same about you. In our official sessions, we both wear our diplomatic masks. But here, driving through this beautiful countryside, I feel like I'm meeting the real Prince William for the first time." "It's strange, isn't it?" the prince mused. "We spend so much time being the people our positions require us to be that we sometimes forget who we actually are underneath all the protocols and expectations." They emerged from a particularly dense section of woods into a clearing where the road straightened for nearly a mile. Rolling hills stretched away on both sides, and in the distance, the spires of an ancient cathedral pierced the horizon like fingers reaching toward heaven. "Your Highness," she said, his voice taking on more serious tone, "may I share something with you that I've never told another foreign leader?" Prince William sensed the gravity in his guest's voice. "Of course, Mr. President. Please speak freely." She was quiet for a moment, carefully choosing his words while maintaining perfect control of the car. "Sometimes I lie awake at night, wondering if I'm making the right decisions for my people. The weight of responsibility is immense. Every policy affects hundreds of millions of lives. Every economic decision ripples across the globe. And yet, I'm just one man with the same doubts and uncertainties as anyone else." The honesty of the confession hung in the air between them. Prince William had expected many things from this drive, but such personal revelation from one of the world's most guarded leaders was not among them. "I think," Prince William said carefully, "that the fact you feel that weight so deeply is exactly what makes you qualified to bear it. Leaders who sleep soundly every night are the ones we should worry about." As they crested a small hill, a magnificent vista opened before them. The Thames Valley spread out like a living map, with a river winding through patchworks of fields and woodlands. Ancient villages nestled in hollows between rolling hills, their church spires marking centuries of human settlement in this timeless landscape. "Look at this," she said, slowing the car slightly to savor the view. Your ancestors have been caring for this land for generations. The continuity is remarkable. In China, we have our own ancient landscapes, but the pace of change in recent decades has been so rapid that sometimes I wonder if we're losing something essential in our rush toward modernization. Prince William nodded thoughtfully. It's a balance every nation struggles with, I think. How do you honor the past while building the future? How do you preserve what's valuable while still allowing for growth and change? The road began to descend through another section of woodland, and she found himself relaxing into the rhythm of driving. The Aston Martin responded to his inputs with precision that bordered on telepathic. Each curve flowed naturally into the next, creating a meditation in motion. You know, she said, there's something about this experience, driving this beautiful machine through your countryside, having this honest conversation, that reminds me why I entered public service in the first place. What do you mean? When I was a young man, fresh from university, I believed I could help build a better world. Not through grand gestures or dramatic policies, but through understanding people, building relationships, finding common ground. Somewhere along the way, the machinery of government tends to separate leaders from that basic human connection. They rounded a final curve and emerged into open countryside again. The afternoon sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky, casting everything in a warm, golden light that photographers call the magic hour. Fields of newly harvested wheat stretched away on both sides, stubble glinting like gold in the slanted sunlight. Prince William's radio crackled again. Your Highness, we're approaching the halfway point of the circuit. Please confirm your intentions for the return journey. Before responding, Prince William looked at Xi. Mr. President, how would you feel about taking a different route back? There's a longer way that would give us another 20 minutes or so together. Xi's face lit up. Your Highness, I would be honored. This has been one of the most enlightening conversations I've had in years. Prince William keyed his radio. Sarah, we'd like to take Route Charlie back to Windsor. Extend our time by 20 minutes if possible. Confirmed, Your Highness. All units adjust for Route Charlie. As they continued through the golden countryside, both men seemed reluctant to break the spell of the afternoon. The Aston Martin purred contentedly beneath them, carrying two of the world's most powerful leaders through a landscape that seemed designed to inspire reflection and honest conversation. Your Highness, she said as they approached another section of winding road, I hope this won't be the last time we can have such a frank discussion. The formal diplomatic channels are necessary, of course, but this kind of human connection, this is how real understanding begins. Prince William smiled, watching the play of light and shadow across the dashboard as they drove beneath overhanging trees. Mr. President, I couldn't agree more. Perhaps we've started something here today that could change how our nations communicate with each other. Neither man could have predicted that their impromptu drive through the English countryside would become the foundation for a new chapter in international relations, one built not on rigid protocols, but on the simple recognition that beneath the titles and responsibilities, leaders are still fundamentally human beings capable of friendship, understanding, and shared adventure. The Windsor Castle gates came into view as the sun began to set, casting long purple shadows across the ancient courtyard. Xi Jinping guided the Aston Martin through the entrance with the confidence of someone who had rediscovered an old skill, the car responding to his touch like a well-trained horse returning to its stable. The afternoon drive had transformed from a diplomatic curiosity into something far more significant, a genuine human connection between two leaders who had discovered they shared more common ground than either had expected. As they pulled to a stop in the same courtyard where their adventure had begun, both men sat quietly for a moment, reluctant to end what had been an extraordinary experience. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, and through the windshield they could see the assembled security teams and diplomatic staff waiting with carefully controlled expressions of relief. Mr. President, Prince William said softly, I want to thank you for trusting me with this afternoon. I know it required considerable courage to step outside the usual protocols. She turned off the engine and handed the keys back to the prince, but his fingers lingered on them for a moment. Your Highness, The courage was yours for suggesting it in the first place. This has been illuminating in ways I never expected. They stepped out of the car to find Chen Wei approaching with his usual professional demeanor, though those who knew him well could detect a hint of relief in his bearing. The past 3 hours had been among the most nerve-wracking of his security career, watching his principal drive through the English countryside in a sports car while discussing state secrets with foreign royalty. Mr. President, Chen reported, all security arrangements proceeded without incident. Your evening schedule remains on track, with the formal dinner beginning in approximately 2 hours. She nodded absently, his attention still partially focused on the Aston Martin. The car seemed different now, no longer just a beautiful machine, but a catalyst for connection. Chen, please arrange for a message to be sent to the Aston Martin Company. I would like to personally thank them for creating such an extraordinary automobile. Detective Inspector Morrison approached Prince William with her own brief report. Your Highness, the afternoon proceeded perfectly. No security concerns, and the media remained completely unaware of the change to your schedule. Excellent work, Sarah, Prince William replied. Though I suspect this won't remain secret for long. The President and I have been discussing some rather significant developments. Indeed, during the final portion of their drive, the conversation had moved beyond personal reflection to concrete diplomatic possibilities. The relaxed atmosphere and genuine trust they had built during their adventure had created space for discussions that would have been impossible in formal settings. As the security teams and staff busied themselves with preparations for the evening's events, she and Prince William found themselves walking slowly toward the castle entrance, both reluctant to return to their official roles. Your Highness, she said, during our conversation today, you mentioned the possibility of establishing a new kind of dialogue between our nations. I would like to pursue that idea seriously. Prince William's eyes lit up with interest. I was hoping you would say that, Mr. President. What if we created an informal communication channel? Not to replace official diplomatic relations, but to supplement them with the kind of honest, direct conversation we've shared today. They paused at the castle entrance, the weight of their positions settling back around them like familiar but heavy coats. But something had fundamentally changed in their relationship. The formal courtesy of their previous interactions had been replaced by genuine respect and the beginning of real friendship. I have a proposal, she said, his voice taking on the decisive tone that had characterized his rise to leadership. What if we made this drive a tradition? Not necessarily with such elaborate security arrangements, but whenever our schedules bring us to the same part of the world, we take time for this kind of informal interaction. Prince William smiled broadly. I think that's a brilliant idea. And not just for us. What if we encouraged other leaders to step outside their usual patterns? Create opportunities for genuine human connection rather than endless formal meetings. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Wang Lei, carrying a folder of messages that had accumulated during the president's absence. Mr. President, the British Prime Minister called to confirm this evening's dinner arrangements. Also, there have been several inquiries from Chinese media about your afternoon activities. She accepted the folder, but didn't open it immediately. Wang, please draft a statement for the media. Tell them that Prince William graciously showed me some of the beautiful English countryside and that our conversations were highly productive. Nothing more specific than that. Of course, Mr. President. Shall I mention the car? She and Prince William exchanged amused glances. Perhaps we keep some details private for now, she replied diplomatically. As evening approached and the time came to separate for their formal preparations, both men seemed changed by their afternoon together. The experience had demonstrated that even in an era of complex international relations and rigid protocols, there was still room for simple human connection. Prince William extended his hand for what started as a formal handshake, but evolved into something warmer. Mr. President, this afternoon has been a genuine privilege. I look forward to continuing our conversation over dinner and to many more such conversations in the future. She clasped the prince's hand firmly, his expression conveying sincere appreciation. Your Highness, You have given me a gift today that cannot be measured in traditional diplomatic terms. You reminded me that beneath our titles and responsibilities, we are all simply human beings trying to make sense of a complex world. As they parted to prepare for the evening's formal events, neither man could have predicted the ripple effects their afternoon drive would create. Word of the president's impromptu adventure would eventually reach automotive enthusiasts around the world, leading to increased interest in British luxury cars in Chinese markets. More importantly, the relationship they had built during their countryside conversation would prove invaluable in navigating future diplomatic challenges. 6 months later, when trade tensions threatened to escalate between their nations, she would call Prince William directly, their conversation beginning with a casual reference to their shared drive. The informal communication channel they had established that afternoon would help defuse several potential conflicts over the following years. The Aston Martin itself would go on to become something of a legend within royal circles. Prince William would often take visiting dignitaries for drives in the same car, using the informal setting to build relationships and facilitate difficult conversations. The vehicle, which had arrived at Windsor as merely the latest addition to the royal garage, had proven itself to be an unexpected tool of diplomacy. But perhaps the most significant outcome of that autumn afternoon was simpler and more fundamental. Two men who had been separated by culture, language, political systems, and the weight of enormous responsibility had discovered that shared humanity could bridge any divide. In an age of increasing polarization and complex international relations, their friendship became a quiet but powerful example of what was possible when leaders chose to see each other as people first and political figures second. Years later, when historians would analyze the gradual improvement in relations between their nations during this period, many would point to formal trade agreements, official treaties, and carefully negotiated diplomatic protocols. But those with access to the private communications between the leaders would know that it all began with a simple invitation to take a drive in the English countryside, and the courage of two men to accept that sometimes the most important diplomacy happens not in conference rooms, but in the front seats of a beautiful car on a winding country road.